What's up, everyone? DSP here, and it's 2010. Thank God. We got some downtime before the next major releases come out this month of January, so it's time for another Hateful Truth. And it is football season, so I decided to kind of dig into my closet, and I actually found one of my old jerseys, the actual custom darksydephil jerseys that I had made way back when I used to be a seriously competitive Street Fighter player. I used to wear the jersey around, and people would basically see me with this on at a tournament and say, "Who the fuck is that asshole wearing his name on his jersey? What a dick!" But yeah, so I decided to drag it out. It's totally not supporting any team. It's generic. There's no team logos on there, just so that I don't offend anyone. But anyway, what we're going to talk about today is the first game that I officially did a playthrough for in 2010. It was kind of interesting because when I first played the demo of this game a couple of months ago, it was right before all the major fourth quarter releases were about to come out, and I actually got a lot of negative feedback regarding the gameplay of the demo. But when the game actually came out, I did buy it. I jumped right in. It's an interesting combination of a bunch of different things that you might not expect, and it actually has an interesting Japanese culture kind of twist to it. If you don't know what game I'm talking about yet, obviously it's my first playthrough of the year, Bayonetta. So let's dive right in. It's 2010. I'm excited. It's the first episode of the Hateful Truth, Bayonetta. Well, Bayonetta is a pretty original game, but as you get through it, you kind of realize, gee, this could lead to some pretty weird misunderstandings if I were to tell my friends what the hell I were doing right now. Take a look at what I mean. Hey Phil, what you playing over there? Just some game. Just came out. Well, what's it about? Well, I play a scantily clad, double D-breasted witch who's fighting off all the legions of angels that come down to Earth. And they all have baby faces and high-pitched voices, and you fight gigantic monster bosses with huge tentacle dicks that you have to sever in order to kill them, and beat them into a bloody pulp until they look like large, hovering, bleeding red testicles. Did you get drunk and wander into the hentai collection again? No, I'm playing Bayonetta. Duh. Oh, duh, Bayonetta, of course. You see what I mean? Try explaining that one without a proper frame of reference. But overall, the game starts out as an interesting kind of a fighter, brawler. It actually has a very strong comparison to Devil May Cry. And that's what everyone said when they saw the demo and when they saw the footage of this game. Oh, it's just Devil May Cry. It's a copy of Devil May Cry. Well, the bottom line is that actually the guy who was the guy behind Devil May Cry actually went to Sega and developed this game as well. So obviously there's going to draw some parallels in the gameplay. And as you play this game, you're going to find that it's kind of like Devil May Cry, it's kind of like some other beat-em-ups, but there's a lot of original things that really make it an interesting take on the whole beat-em-up genre.
The combat in Bayonetta is both simple and complex, and let me explain what I mean when I say that. The game's button layout is pretty much the same as any other beat-em-up. I mean, you got your standard punch button, your kick button, you've got a button that can jump. You actually have a shoot button, which basically means whatever weapon you have in your hand at the time, which is usually a gun, you're going to shoot with that gun, which is pretty cool. You can interrupt any combo with a gunshot for ranged attacks, and you can always just run away and keep shooting even though it does little damage to most enemies. Now, as you progress on in the game, you're going to unlock different weapons. And the way you actually get weapons is by finding these discs in the game, musical discs. They look like CDs. And you can get them either by killing bosses, or you can get them by defeating larger enemies. Or you can also just find pieces of these discs littered around the world, hidden, in walls and things like that. And they unlock different weapons such as a whip, a katana blade. Later on, you get some claws, and then there are other weapons which even I didn't unlock because they were hidden, and I didn't spend too much time, running around looking for them. But depending on what weapon you have, the attack combinations and the combos can get pretty varied, and just like any other beat 'em up, you can press punch a couple times and then kick a couple times. You can maybe delay the button presses to get some slowed down special attacks. But once you start getting the weapons is when you really start to let loose and see how many different variations, combinations, and attacks there are. And some attacks will stun your enemy, some attacks will knock them back, some are good from close range and do more damage, some are good for far away. And there's a lot of variety in the melee combat of this game. Now, one of the cool things about this is the dodge button, and the dodge button can be used at any time, even in the middle of a combo, which is pretty innovative for a game like this. If you time your dodge perfectly, you go into what's called witch time, which is basically a slow motion, scene where you're moving standard speed, but because you dodge at the very last second, whatever your opponent was doing, you can now have a free reign to do a full combo on them while they move in slow motion. And this is pretty much how you beat a lot of the harder enemies in the game, a lot of the bosses. And because of the witch time, you're able to build up magic ability, which also lets you pull off some pretty spectacular torture attacks. Now, torture attacks are pretty crazy. Basically, Bayonetta just pulls shit out of her ass. I mean, I saw her pull out a guillotine and chop someone's head off. She pulled out a giant wheel and just ran it over them with someone with spikes. I mean, there's just some crazy stuff here and a lot of different ways that Bayonetta tortures her opponents. And then in addition to that, there's also larger finishing attacks where when you're fighting a boss or you're fighting a larger enemy, you basically finish them off by having your outfit come off your body, turn into some kind of a creature, and either devour them or rip them limb from limb. So there's a lot to the gameplay. There's a lot to the combat in this game. The more you play, the more variety of the combat you're going to find, and you're going to get addicted to it just like I did and want to keep playing more and more.
So the torture attacks and the finishers are really what add to this game and make it very unique. I mean, in what other beat-em-up game can you just all of a sudden become completely naked, have your clothing turn into a giant 20-foot tall Barney the dinosaur that bites your enemy's fucking head off and devours them on sight? I mean, that's just awesome. That's kind of really weird and far-fetched, but at the same time, it's pretty badass. And as the game progresses and you get different torture attacks, different finishers, and you begin to see a lot of them, it really adds replayability to the game. And you say, man, I want to keep playing because I want to keep seeing what's going to happen. Am I going to get a new attack, another crazy finisher? So the gameplay overall, I would say, is pretty interesting. It's not at all unique too much. There are a couple elements that are thrown in that maybe are a little bit different from a game like Devil May Cry, but for the most part, it's a standard beat 'em up with a lot of variety of weapons, interesting finisher attacks, and a lot of flash. One of the things that I really didn't like about the game, and I didn't really get, was the story aspect. And as you play this game, you kind of wonder, gee, it's a beat 'em up. Does it really need that great of a story? We all know, that it's really going to be focused around the gameplay. So I wonder what, the story's really going to be like.
The story of Bayonetta is confusing, and right off the bat, it's just really weird. I mean, you start off with a character who looks just like Joe Pesci, and he's annoying as hell. He sounds like him. It even sounds like a really annoying parody of him. And as the story progresses, you find out that basically it's a war between the witches and the angels, and there's this really weird thing going on with, some kind of sages trying to take over the world, and they're trying to unify the light and the dark, and the two jewels and the rubies, and there's all kinds of crazy shit. And honestly, it's so hard to keep track of at some point that you really give up, and you're like, you know what, I wish I just could go back to fighting, because I really don't want to sit here for the next 15 minutes trying to figure out what's going on. And even some of the characters in this game are really just kind of played out. I mean, you got the guy who basically works in the underworld, which is supposed to be the gates of hell, and he unlocks different items for you. He sells you things. He can give you different weapons once you find the disc pieces. But he just looks so generic. He looks like a cross between like Blade or some Tekken 6 reject. I mean, he just does not look original at all. And as you go on, there's other characters. There's a plot twist where somehow you find yourself as a girl and you're trying to protect yourself, and it just really doesn't make much sense at all. It's never even really explained later on. So my recommendation with this is to just pretty much ignore the story and just enjoy the gameplay. I think what they really were going for was like a Japanese anime style thing where you try to get interested in all these crazy things going on, but Honestly, I don't think this kind of a thing it caters too well to Western audiences, unless you're, a fan of Japanese anime or an otaku, and you really like this kind of thing. For me, I don't know. It just wasn't my cup of tea, and I just couldn't wait to get back to the combat.